Welcome to the LC Parent Podcast, where we get real about the struggles, victories, and laughs we share as parents.
Oh, goodness. Thank you guys so much for being with us here today. I love recording the LC Parents Podcast. I feel like this has been one of the most fun things that I've done in ministry. If we haven't met yet, my name is Allie Evans. I'm the Central Group Leader for Next Gen Ministries at Life.Church. Essentially, what that means is I have the incredible blessing and opportunity to lead the ministries for kids and students here at Life.Church. And you and I know that as parents, there's so much to your church partnering with you, far more than just providing incredible, by the way, content that we have here at the church in Life Kids and in Switch. Also, it's so important that we help your child not connect just with the truth of God's word, but connect with another adult voice in the life of your child. In our context, that's their small group leader. And so when your kids come to Life Kids and Switch, there's this other adult that is speaking truth. You know, we all know that. I don't know. Have you guys ever had that experience where you've said the same thing over and over and your kid thinks you're crazy, but as soon as their teacher or their coach or their small group leader at church says it, it's like all of a sudden the gospel? Well, that's okay. It's by design. God wants us to have other voices that are speaking into the lives of our kids. And so at Life.Church, we're super excited that you have chosen us to be that partner with you. The LC Parents Podcast is another way that we hope to partner with you. We hope that you will find some nuggets of wisdom. We hope that as you're listening today that you're going to laugh a little bit. Maybe you'll even cry. I don't know. I never know what each episode is going to hold. But when you walk away and you turn off this podcast today, I hope that you have a couple of actionables. Here's some things that I can do to grow as I lead my family spiritually. And so thank you for listening. Grab a cup of coffee or jump on your treadmill, whatever it looks like for you, and take a listen. So often I have incredible female guests on the podcast, and I recognize, man, I need some guys. I need some strong male leaders who can come on the podcast and help us, give us some wisdom, all of the things that challenge us as it relates to being a great parent. And today, I just am pumped. I'm pumped. We have a very special guest. His name is Jason Inman. Thank you, Jason, for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to let Jason do kind of his own introduction, but Jason is, first of all, a dad, which gives him tons of equity with us because he's doing the thing right now, right? So he's going to tell you a little bit about his family, but also...
A lot of germs.
Yeah, right? Especially now. But Jason also is one of our content creators here at Life.Church and is also one of the, I don't know what the right word is, the host
Just make
for
up a
the
word.
You've Heard It Said
Yes, I'm
podcast.
one of the hosts. Yep.
Yes, so I want you to talk about the You've Heard It Said podcast.
Okay.
And specifically, he writes a lot of great content for adults in general, but also very specifically for life groups. And you guys know how we feel about all of us being engaged in a great group, a community, adult friends that we do life with. Here at Life.Church, we call those life groups. And man, we're not supposed to parent alone. And so I love that Jason is here because he's also a huge advocate for life groups. So I'm sure we're going to wind up touching on that quite a bit. But Jason, before we introduce our topic for today, tell us a little bit more about you and your family and what you do here.
Okay, so I've been married 13 years to Christy. And she studied social work in college and did that for a little while professionally. And now she still does it professionally, but just as a mom with 5 kids.
Oh.
So,
that is, I would call it professional.
And the oldest will be 12 real soon, probably by the time this airs. And then my 10-year-old turned 10 today. And then we go all the way down to 3. So
fantastic.
The house is just like a crazy party all the time. Like for anyone who had kids who are learning at home in this last year or so, imagine 4 of them all on different computers trying to do school for a year.
I can't.
It's just been really fun. So that's what life looks like at home for us. And then here at work, I think you described it well. You know, we get to make content that helps people discover how to be more like Jesus in their world and their neighborhood. So
That's awesome.
That's pretty fun.
I love it how succinctly and clearly you describe what it is that we do. Really, growing in your relationship with Jesus isn't some big, daunting, complicated thing. And I think that sometimes, particularly for those of us who are newer in our faith as adults, we can overcomplicate that. So thank you for making that so clear, first of all, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about today specifically.
Or maybe everything.
Or maybe everything. True, very true. You and I have talked before, and one of the things that I loved about you sharing some of your stories being a parent is about how important it is that our children, and now that I'm picturing 5 kids in your house, I'm thinking incredibly important, how important it is that our kids learn to make decisions on their own.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've struggled with this. I certainly have. But when I was raising my girls, I thought for some reason that there was this assignment as a parent that I needed to make all of their decisions.
Yep.
You know, they're young and I need to make their decisions.
Yep.
And I honestly didn't know when to cut that off. Is it middle school? Is it 11 you stop making their decisions? Is it 16 when they start driving? Is it 18 when they go off to college or to their vocation? Like, when do you stop if you've invited yourself into this trap of being the decision maker for everything that your child does? It's a trap.
Yep.
So, Jason, I want you to share with us, first of all, how important is it that we kind of break free from that trap? And I know that, we're not experts in this field. We're just parents.
Yeah.
So I know that our listeners will love to hear any mistakes that you've made, challenges you're still experiencing. I've got a list of a gazillion mistakes in this area.
Yeah.
But talk a little bit about that. How important is it?
Well, first of all, I have plenty of mistakes that we can talk about. I will share lots of them. But can we start first with me at I'm probably 4 years old.
Wait, a personal story?
Is that all right?
This is even better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this went on for a couple years, but it maybe started when I was 4 or 5. I've got a bright blonde hair that just, comes down around my face like a bowl. And I'm in probably whatever shorts I found to put on. I'm the youngest of 7 boys, right? So,
What?
So whatever clothing I have has probably been worn by other brothers multiple times. And we live in this really cool place for a little kid where we've got a hill that went kind of up behind our house, maybe an acre. To me, it felt like 100 acres,
Sure.
Maybe an acre. And it was pretty untouched. So I could go up there and just explore. So imagine this 4 or 5-year-old kid exploring this hillside. And I don't know if my mom really knew, but I'd turn over a rock and sometimes find a snake.
Oh my
right?
goodness.
So this is just wild.
It's best she didn't know, right?
So I became known eventually as the lizard catcher because I would always update everybody on my current number. It's hey, I've caught 7 lizards. As an Enneagram 3, it was important for everybody to know, how well I was performing.
Sure.
One of the things I would do when I would catch the lizard is I would get it in my hand. And I don't know how I could catch those things. This little, I'd get it in my hand. I'd have my hand kind of closed up, and they would calm down. And I'd slowly open my hand. I'd get to the point where I could hold this lizard in an open hand, and it wouldn't run away. And everybody thought it was like magic. I'd hold the lizard long enough sometimes that I could set it on the ground and pick it back up. You guys are you're staring at me how does this have anything to do with parenting?
I need to understand the lizard connection.
We're going to get there. I think parenting, raising a kid, is a lot like holding a wild lizard.
Okay.
So you think that, man, to raise these kids well, I just got to just hold them real tight and close. I need to make all their decisions. I need to make sure they don't mess up. I need to make sure they don't get hurt. I need to make sure that someone in a relationship doesn't let them down. And you got this closed hand, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of new to this. My oldest kid's 11, but so far it seems like actually, yes, there is a moment where you need to hold them close, and there are decisions you need to make for them. But most of parenting, almost all of it, is slowly opening that hand and helping that kid to feel safe in an open hand. To then eventually you can set them down and they won't run away.
Wow. Okay, we can just stop the recording now. That's all we needed. No, thank you so much. That's such a great illustration. So
can I now tell you about all the times I squeezed the lizard really hard?
Yes. And yeah, I don't know that we need the full illustration, Jason, but no, that's such a great, I love that imagery because you're so right, though. There's something empowering about the hand kind of coming open for that lizard and for the lizard to have a choice. And I know that I'm kind of over intellectualizing this lizard, but the fact that he could run away.
Yeah.
But there's something about that freedom. So anyway, you were sharing a story with me about maybe your child was 2 or 3 or something, and you were just beginning.
Yeah. So early on in parenting, when we started parenting early, a lot of people do, but we were in our early 20s and trying to figure it out. And when you're trying to figure it out, you just look at other people. And so we were in a group with some great people, and we started to pick up on from them kind of like, okay, if you want your kids to obey and you want them to make good choices, you need to make sure that they're just always doing what you say, what you want them to do. And even to the extent of it felt like maybe there was something wrong with us and with our kids because they just, you're raising toddlers, right?
Right.
They do not do what you want them to do.
Right.
Pastor Craig rightfully calls them terrorists. They're not just not obeying; they're there to try to destroy the place, right? And so it was like, okay, maybe I need to raise my voice louder. Maybe do they need another? Like some kind of consequence. You start to run out of consequences. I'm going to take away this entire kid's future. If I'm only using consequences.
Yes.
And so it just felt like joyless.
Right.
Like here we have these beautiful little lives and this incredible opportunity. And we spent so many of our evenings talking about how we had failed all day.
Right.
I lost my temper, or I just don't even, I feel like I'm not even enjoying right now being a parent. Both me and my wife went through that. And, so then it's either our kids are the problem, they just must be wild, or we're the problem and we're just not respectful or respectable people and there's something wrong with us. But the other option was actually illuminated by my mom, honestly. And I should have known this, thinking of a mother who let her 5-year-old wander on the hillside, right?
Right.
But she had come to visit us, and we were in this group, kind of like a Sunday school or small group type setting. And I think she picked up on the conversation a little bit, and she says, she said it so nicely. She was like, it kind of sounds like we almost think our kids belong to us.
Oh, wow.
And this is my mom's first time,
With all these young parents.
I'm like putting my head down. She goes, as far as I can tell, they're just a gift from God that we get to steward and guide and one day release to follow him,
Yeah.
And I was just like...
Everybody had the knot in their throat.
Yeah, it was just such a good reminder of like, I haven't been trying to steward and guide my kids. I've been trying to make sure they do everything right all the time.
Yes.
And there's a big difference.
So good. I just had lunch with someone who shared with me, and I think this is so interesting and so true. But oftentimes, and tell me what you think. So I'm not claiming this to be true. We can talk about it. But there's this power struggle thing, and maybe it's even more so with their firstborn because we really don't know what we're doing, right? We may have read all of the books that tell you there is a formula, which I kind of agree with your mom. It's like, I don't know that that's the case. So there's this power struggle thing. It's about control because ultimately we fear.
Right.
We fear that somehow our kid is not going to be perfect because that's a reflection on us.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, yes. You talked about reading books. Man, so you read all these books, and then you're up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and you've been like training your kid to sleep or whatever. Like, that's a joke. Sorry. Sleep. That's another podcast.
It's a whole other episode.
Anyways, you're training your kid to sleep, and they're not doing it, and then all of a sudden it reflects on you, and you're out of control. And if I'm not in control, I must be bad, and then that's something about my identity. And now all of a sudden I'm angry, and how could I be angry at this beautiful little newborn? And it's just this cycle that you've got to break free from. Mm-hmm. So yes, I do think there's a huge connection to identity, and we have to figure out, and when I say we, I mean me and everyone else, because I'm currently in the middle of this.
Right.
We have to figure out how to unhitch who we are from how our kids act. Because if
that's
I
good.
need my kids to do the right thing so that I can be the right person, then, I mean, just imagine, like, you're putting that on a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Their right behavior needs to make me feel better as a 34-year-old. That just seems like, I
Right.
don't know. I mean, there's names for that, child labor. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. We could call it all kinds of
Right,
things,
yeah.
but it's not parenting.
Wow. Part
And
of
I'm
what
currently guilty of it, I should say.
Right.
Currently figuring out, like, why do I get so worked up when... Or you have another question? I can't tell you a story about this morning.
Please.
Okay.
Oh, just from this morning. Okay.
Okay.
Great.
So this morning, it's my 10-year-old's birthday, and his little brother comes out, and he's kind of not quite yelling, but like really giving his mom a hard time in the kitchen. And I immediately was just like, oh, no, you don't talk to my wife that way. I'm feeling this stuff inside. So I walk out there, take a deep breath. Thankfully, I feel like I respond the right way. I say, hey, buddy, you need to go take a break in your room. So he takes a break. We talk about it. I ask him, why do you think you needed to take a break? And he's able to tell me. And he kind of identifies the choices he made that weren't quite right. And he identifies a new way forward, and like, we're good. Mm-hmm. And then I look at him, and he's wearing this cut off like skater shirt with like maybe a skull. I don't know what's on the front. And he's got like a robe on, and he just looks like he showed up to like teach the world a lesson today.
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, I think there's something going on here. Well, he's going in the right direction, but why is it that just that one moment of him disrespecting my wife was just all of a sudden, I just feel it so deeply inside.
Right.
And there's been so many times as a parent where that wasn't, hey, buddy, can you go wait in your room?
Right.
It was, hey, you get over here.
Right.
You don't talk to your mother that way.
Right.
And back to your original question, in that moment, if I respond that way, I've completely removed his ability to make choices. I've just told him what the problem is. I've told him he's a problem.
Right.
He now feels like a failure. And when you feel like a failure, making your own choices feels almost impossible.
Right.
So, yeah, it's
that's
gone the
good.
wrong way many times. But the funny thing about this morning, then it's time for school to start, right? And he's kind of bummed about school because it's like there's snowing outside. Normally he wouldn't have to go to school, but because of remote school, he still has to go to school. And it's his brother's birthday. And so he comes back out. He's still got on this, outfit. And I'm like, bud, you need to go put on a different shirt, So he goes back to his room. He comes back out. He still has on this shirt, but he's put on a long sleeve shirt underneath it. So then we have an opportunity. Do I tell him, hey, get back to your room and change your shirt? Mm-hmm. Or what do? And I'm about to tell him to get back to his room and change his shirt. And from the kitchen, I hear my wife, and she goes, oh, Paul, good job, buddy.
Oh, that's good.
And she picked her battle.
Yes.
And put the choice back in his hands. And I was thankful that she did, because otherwise I wouldn't have a good story for the podcast.
No, that's so good. And there's a couple of things that I'm hearing you say. One is choosing your battles, right?
Yeah.
So what is a hill worth dying on? Whether or not he had on the skull. I mean, you were feeling pretty passionate about because he was going to be on virtual school on video.
Yeah, there's rules about, what you can
You
wear
wanna
and
look,
stuff.
yeah.
I mean, it was like a cutoff, muscle shirt. It was not
looking pretty silly. So that's part of it, is what are the hills worth dying on?
Yeah.
And also then putting the decision-making ability in the hands of your child. I'll share a real quick story because I'm really resonating with that. I've shared on the podcast about this before. I had a couple of kids living with us for a short season. It'd be sort of like foster care.
Yeah.
And the 7-year-old is just precious. Anyway, I could tell that we were going to have some conversations about how he was playing with toys, where he was leaving his toys, and all those kinds of things. And I could have easily slipped into Allie Evans mode, which is high control.
Yep.
Here's how things will go. Here's where you're going to put what.
Same.
And someone's wisdom popped into my head. And so instead I moved into, let's talk about toys. So we're going to talk about where they go and then what happens when the toys don't wind up back where they go. So let's talk about that. What does that look like? And so I gave him the opportunity to say, if I don't put the toys back where he agreed they should go, right?
Yeah.
So he said the toys need to go in the box, and the box needs to be in my room because then I know where they are the next time, right? So I helped him walk through that logic. And then I asked him, so if that doesn't happen, what should happen? And it actually works. Like he came up with, I should lose my tablet for the evening. And I went, oh man, that sounds pretty serious. Because that was not at all going to be anything that I would have come up with. Because for him, that's a big deal. And I said, yeah, okay, if you feel like that's where we need to go. And he was like, yeah, that'll be it. And it was so precious because he actually made those decisions.
Yeah.
Now, did he ever have to suffer his own consequence? Yes, he did. And not too much longer later than he levied that on himself. So I do think that there are some ways that we can help our kids at a really young age begin to make some of those decisions for themselves. So Jason, when does that start for you guys? When did you and Christy start to allow the boys to begin to make some decisions about behaviors and how they're going to treat one another? And what does it look like when you don't, follow your own rules or your own guidelines? What does that look like?
So back to the lizard, okay?
Yeah.
When you're first holding it, you are providing a little bit more safety. Everybody knows, like an infant, you're not just going to be like, hey, well, what do you think you should do with the toys?
Right, exactly.
There's some common sense there. For us, we learned, I guess I should say, to start earlier than we thought we could. We started before kids could communicate clearly. We would communicate clearly with them.
Okay.
And so this is before talking age for kids. And we'd just tell them what we were doing. We'd talk to them about why they were having to lay down for a little while. We would ask them what they wanted before they even knew the words to answer what they wanted. Total side note, but teaching your kids a few sign language, skills is so helpful at that age. So I think we started before we thought they were ready. That was sort of our go-to, again, after we sort of made some mistakes and learned. When you have 5 kids, you get to learn.
Yeah.
Sorry, my oldest, but that's just how it works. So, I think start before you think they're ready and start in a safe environment. So Tim Elmore talks about this, starting when the stakes are low.
Yes.
My wife is like regularly repeating that to me when we're making a decision to let a kid figure out their own thing. Hey, the stakes are low. The stakes are still low. So start as soon as you can, right? Well, the stakes are much lower when you're talking about toys than when they're 18 and you're talking about relationships or a car or college or whatever the conversation is.
Yes, that's so good. I know that there's so often, gosh, I could reflect back to several different episodes where this topic comes up all the time. And I think Robin Meadows was on the show a couple of episodes ago, and she had mentioned that going to church was not an option for their kids. It was a hard line. This is what we do because it's who we are. We're people who follow Jesus, and part of that is being engaged at our church. But she also knew that a day would come, because she learned the hard way from the older kids, when the kids would begin to say, I don't want to. That's not something I'm going to do. So she presented some opportunities to make decisions to the kids about Sunday mornings. Do we want to have breakfast before we go, or do we want to have brunch after church? Do you want to wear your shoes with the bows, or do you want to wear your open-toed sandals? Those kinds of things, so that there was always an opportunity for the kids to make their own choices when the stakes are low. Who cares what shoes they wore, right? Yeah. That really wasn't a deal, but it's empowering for the kid. It's like you had described, it's opening your hand just a little bit to make sure that when the time does come, when the stakes are higher, they have a real basic skill set, right, of decision making.
And find out why they don't want to go to church.
That's so great. So or any of those things, right?
For our kids, I've had these conversations already, and it's like, oh, well, what is it that you're wanting to do? Oh, well, why are you wanting to do that?
That's good.
Okay, so why do we sometimes want to go to church? Oh, okay, so which one of those do you feel is more important to you?
Right.
And then all of a sudden we're back to them wanting to go to church.
Yes.
And they were able to make that decision themselves. Now, it's not going to go that way every time. And as kids get older, that might be a different conversation. But as much as we can, I'm leading with questions as much as possible.
That's so good.
When we're doing it right.
Right. I think too, I've felt this way myself, so I'll just confess that. And I've heard other parents say this, that when I'm doing all of this relating, all
Yeah.
of this question asking and allowing them to have their own thoughts and opinions, that somehow, I'm losing control.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it's harder.
Yeah.
It's harder to make. It's easier when I can just say, here's the 5 rules to live in our house.
Yeah.
Period. Those are the rules. Don't ask questions. We like easy.
Yeah.
So what is the value, do you think, in spending the time that it takes to do all the things that you just described? I mean, you got to have the conversations.
Yeah.
Ultimately, what do we hope to get out of that?
Well, I think this is why at the beginning of the conversation, we kind of laughed about maybe this whole conversation is about becoming more like Jesus.
Yes.
So
That's
one
good.
thing I heard my parents tell people when people would be like, hey, like 7 kids, like that's crazy. Or people would be like 7 boys, like there were 7 boys. That is crazy. Wait, time out. That is crazy.
Right.
But I'd hear them say, parenting has been our best opportunity to become more like Christ.
Oh, wow.
And if you think about it, I have to lay down my pride. I have to, like you said earlier, deal with my own identity problems. I have to let this toddler demand things of me that I often wouldn't even let my boss talk to me that way.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the traits that are required to be a good parent and to parent with love and patience look so much like following Jesus. And so I think there's one.
Gosh,
but then,
that's, yeah.
Back to the lizard. Sorry.
We always got to go back to the lizard.
If I do it the other way and I just squeeze the lizard tighter and tighter, what happens when I set it down? It's gone.
Oh, yeah. It started
Right?
off into the woods.
Or maybe worse. Maybe
yeah,
I
I'm
squeeze
like,
it too
Are we
tight.
talking about the demise of the lizard here?
No. It's not gonna.
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
Not,
He
it's gonna
started
run.
off.
It's gonna run away from the things that about me that it felt like were the problem. It might run away from church. It might run away from relationship with me. It might, run away from all kinds of things. Right. So
Yes.
I hate to lead with like the fearful part. I think that the positive part is it's going to make you look more like Jesus if you learn to listen to your kids. Kids are trying to come to Jesus. This is Matthew chapter 19. They're trying to come to Jesus, and his own followers are like, no, get those kids out of here. And then Jesus, what does he say? Let them come to me.
Yes.
Does he say, let them come to me so I can like force them to do what I want them to do?
Right.
No, he says, let them come to me. And he turns to the adults and he says, basically, you need to learn to see the world like a kid because this is what the kingdom of heaven is made of, is little ones like these.
Yes.
And so, yeah,
That's
it's
so
an
good.
opportunity to become more like a little one, like the little one in front of you.
That's so good. That is so good. And I actually didn't even expect you to go there, so I'm glad that you did, because honestly, that's what this is all about. And back to what I believe it was either your mom or Christy said about really,
Someone wise.
Yes, someone wise in your life said, really, these children are just ours to steward.
Yeah.
They aren't ours anyway. And so how can we honor God in what it is that we do? And when we coach them and we lead them through relationship, I mean, that's always going to be the win.
Yeah.
And ultimately, behaviors that we expect really aren't the goal. It's for them to have a heart that longs for Jesus and is growing closer to Jesus themselves. Okay, so we didn't even get to broccoli. Broccoli is a huge challenge for families. And I say that kind of in jest, but the truth is we all have these sort of battlefields, choosing your battle. Eat the broccoli. You'll never leave the table. This broccoli's coming back until
That's
you
me.
eat it. You're going to starve, And so we could all probably point one of those out. But I'm going to ask you to bring a little bit of your professional stance, your role at Life.Church as the Life Groups content guy. If Life Groups are using this podcast episode, which we hope that they are, as a jumping off point for great conversation in their Life Groups this week, what are 2 or 3 questions they could be asking themselves? How can we help them have a great conversation around this issue of helping our kids become great decision makers for themselves?
I'm glad you asked about life groups because I think having people around you who are different than you and who parent different than you is so important.
That's good.
It's going to challenge you. It's going to grow you. You're going to learn more. So first question I think would be something like, what can we learn from our kids this week? So I think we're good at learning for our kids. Like
Yes.
if you're listening to this podcast, you're learning for your kids. You want to become a better parent on behalf of your kids. That's great. That's important. but we need to get better at learning from our kids.
Right.
So that's the asking the why and the listening and then finding out what's going on in their little hearts. So what can we learn from our kids this week? I think another one would be, what can we learn from each other? So ask the life group, ask each person to share, here's something I think we do pretty good at as parents. Or maybe even you're looking across and you're saying, hey, here's something we think you guys do pretty good at as
that's
parents.
good.
And then ask them to share, how did they come to realize that that's a great way to parent their kids? And just what can we learn from each other?
So good.
Those are two that I think will take up plenty of conversation.
And get
for
it
you.
going. That's so great. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your stories and that analogy. I think all the listeners are going to remember the don't squeeze the lizard. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for listening. We hope that as you leave the podcast today, that there's a nugget that you picked up on, and that this is going to inspire great conversation with those that are partnering with you to lead your kids to become fully devoted followers of Christ. Like every week, we're excited to see you this week at church.